Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube for Pigs Round 20 Captaincy Recommendations. What is going on with the Supercoach scoring at the moment? There was a 200 and a 197 last week to back up that 198 from the week before. Woo! We are seeing some real ceilings being smashed over the last fortnight. And plus, on top of that, we had some popular players take advantage as well. We had a Dayos 169, a Rao 161, a Grundy 153, a Green 150, a Wang 140. Some big scores. Hopefully you're able to get onto one of them. I myself got that Grundy 153 as my VC and I happily took that. But the scary thing is, looking ahead, I think that this week is going to be even bigger. My research shows that 28-15, which was the top weekly score last week, actually shared by two coaches, 28-15, that's the highest score of the year so far. I'm here to tell you that that record is in serious danger this week, and it could be blown out of the park. I'm here to tell you that I'm expecting someone to crack 2,900 this week. And, dare I say it, when was the last time we saw a 3,000 Supercoach week? Honestly, I'm not ruling that out. That would be pretty insane, but that is how good the captaincy options are this week, and just how many of them are very, very, very popular captaincy or just ownership selections that I think someone out there is going to have all 10 of my captaincy recommendations, and that team is going to the moon. This is going to be a huge week. I'm calling it, could be the biggest scoring week of the year. 2,900, easily. Someone's going to smash that in. Could they even go bigger? We'll see. But that's enough foreplay. Let's get into it. Number 3, vice captain, is Josh Dunley. Dunkley's in great form right now. He put up a 151 in an easy matchup and then a 129 in a really tough matchup. Well, here comes another easy matchup against the Gold Coast Suns. The Gold Coast Suns team that's given up a 159 to Zach Merritt a few weeks ago, as well as a 121 to Cozzy Pickett and a 136 to Tom Green prior to that. I do need to flag that neither Nick Dayos or Jordan Dawson took advantage of this Gold Coast matchup in the last 2 weeks, despite me recommending them here in these videos. However, I think we go for a third time lucky, and you back in Josh Dunkley here. If you own Hugh McCluggage or Lockie Neal, or even Dane Zorko, you could consider them as well. But I really like the form line of Dunks and the fact that if Gold Coast do try and clamp anyone, it won't be him. More likely the Lions give Dunkley that shutdown role to follow either Anderson or Rao, which means he should be around the ball as much as he could handle, and he is loving that right now. This is a guy who has 13 and 15 tackles in his last 2 games. What an animal. Those tackle numbers are Supercoach gold and are one of the reasons he can put up huge scores on any given day. And in any normal week, Josh Dunkley in this kind of form against this opponent could be actually a number 1 VC. But not this week. He's not even number 2 because we've got 2 amazing options to choose from. Number 2, well, maybe number 1B, is Brody Grundy. Brody is still the in-form player of the competition, now extending his hot streak to 10 games. We're talking about a 10-round average over 145. Let me make something clear. He has never done that in his career. Ever. Even in his prime Collingwood ruck pig days, this is the highest 10-week scoring stretch of his career. And now he gets another incredibly easy matchup. The run is just gravy. The GWS Giants are the 3rd easiest matchup for opposing ruckmen over the last 10 games. The 3rd easiest. They just gave up a 96 to Blitz halves. They gave up a 163 to Jared Witts. To be fair, that 163 from Witts was against Nick Madden, but we do have a long history to show that Kieran Briggs is just not a restrictive ruckman. I mean, he allowed a Nank 142 and a Jackson 143 kind of prior to his bye. Brody Grundy is winning the hit out in over 50% of his ruck contests. He has the single best mark by any first choice ruckman this year at winning the hit out. He is the very best ruckman at winning hit outs. Look, he's the ruck pig, and he's adjusted best to the new ruck rules. And to be fair, Briggs has improved in that hit out area too. He isn't the pushover that he was when people could just jump all over him. But is he enough to stop Grundy? No, he's not. Grundy scored a monster 153 last week, and that was despite resting the entire fourth quarter at full forward while Laddams chopped him out. That could have been a 180 easily, and now that he's already had his in-game rest, it's full steam ahead for the Jellyfish man. Look, here we go, 1A. I was really struggling whether to rank Grundy or Bont higher in this game. I think you should just consider them 1A and 1B at this stage. Maybe toss a coin, I don't really know. If Laddams plays again, look, maybe you give Bont the edge. If Laddams is out and Grundy's not going to get a chop out, maybe you give Grundy the edge. But let's discuss Bont. Recently having signed a fresh 4-year deal to stay at the kennel, and fresh off being snubbed as the greatest Bulldogs player of all time, it's been a big week off the track for Marcus. The Cash Converters mascot is in ripping touch. He's got a 3-round average of 144, despite 2 of those being very hard matchups. Well, look out, non-owners, because this week is not a hard matchup. Oh no, not at all. A date with the insipid, injury-riddled Essendon Bombers. The 5th easiest matchup for inside midfielders over the last 10 games, who seem to be getting worse and worse every week. Last week, I recommended UVC Tom Green against the Bombers, as they just weren't going to be able to contain his heft and girth. Well, let me tell you, Bontempelli has his own heft and girth to throw around. Last week, the Bombers ran a CBA rotation of Zach Merritt, Sam Durham, and way too much Dylan Shield, with a splattering of Jay Gresham and Andy McGrath. If that isn't blatant tanking, I don't know what is. Imagine asking Jay Gresham to match up with Bont this week. Just forget it. That is stupid. Look, Durham has done a run with Royal with Bont once before, but Essendon are not trying to win this game. Why would they? Marcus will run free against an undersized and undermanned midfield. He's got motivation because the Bulldogs have a chance to finish top 4 for the first time during his captaincy, and a Friday night percentage booster will go a long way to making that happen. This is Bont's world. We're just living in it. Pod captain Tim English. I was weighing up whether to recommend Errol Goulden or Isaac Heaney as my pod captain last week, and I made the wrong choice. He literally more than doubled Goulden. But we move on. We move on to the big boy from the West, Timmy English. He's got a 4-round average of 101. That's a bit yucky. And honestly, I think he's going to be a huge pod VC because of that. I doubt anyone else will be recommending him. And if they are, good on them. But I don't reckon anyone else has quite identified this. Because those last 4 weeks have been against very, very hard opponents. And that 101 actually isn't that bad considering who he played against. This week, it opens up for him in a big way. A date with Essendon, who are the 2nd easiest ruck matchup this season. They just allow their opponents to put on huge scores on them. So let's go through some of them. Briggs had 124 last week. That was 17 more than his current form. Nank had a 132 on them prior to that. That's 23 points above what his form is. Remember, Jackson absolutely cooked them for that 186 in round 15. He went 62 points above his form. Plus, prior to that, there was a Tom de Koning 146, and Tim English himself got a 122 against them. Those are some insane scores, and it doesn't really matter whether it's Goldstein or Vicentini in the ruck line. Both are leaking like a sieve. We've got to go back to round 15 to see the last time Tim English got a very easy ruck matchup, and he smashed a 142 in that one. So the man still got it, and this matchup is looking like one where he will reward his owners with interest. I was also weighing up suggesting Libba or Dale in this spot, so if you have them, you may wish to consider them as an option. As you know with me, I'm recommending English because I just have a lot of trust. When I see a premium ruckman coming up against an easy opponent, I just think the spike scores seem to be more predictable. And you know what I'm like, I love to target ruckman in easy matchups, so that's why I'm recommending English. Number 6, let's go into the captains. Maxi Holmes. Max had a very slow start last weekend. He was butchering the ball in the first quarter. I think there was a point where he had 9 disposals and was barely past 9 SuperCoach. So he made up for that later in the game. He got himself to 115. So he did well in the last few quarters. But that's a couple of times in recent weeks that he's bungled a great score with poor disposal efficiency. Maybe Bailey Smith's kicking habits are rubbing off on him. I don't know. It shouldn't be an issue this week though. A date with North Melbourne. They're the second easiest matchup for inside midfielders over the last 10 games. Remember, this is a North team that just allowed that Isaac Heaney 197 masterclass. That Heaney game was nearly one of the best individual games I've ever seen, or at least in recent memory, and they just did nothing to stop it. There's also a team that allowed Tom Liberatore to have a 171 and a Caleb Sarong 142 before that. As you can see from those names, it has been the real in and under inside midfielder clearance beasts that have been destroying the Roos in recent games, which isn't really Holmes, but it's also not really Bailey Smith. So when I was weighing up either to recommend which one of them, I looked at Holmes and I looked at Smith, I looked at their CBAs and I looked at their clearances per game, and they're actually nearly identical. They're doing the same CBAs and getting the same clearances, so that doesn't really help. Maybe it's actually going to be Tom Atkins that really rips this game apart. But I'm not going to waste a spot in this video in my top 10 recommending Tom Atkins. So I'll go with Max. Simply on the fact that Baz looked a bit slow last weekend. And if you listen to Goat Fantasy, you would have heard that Bailey Smith was touching his hamstring in the week leading up to the game last week at training. So it's never a great sign. So simply on that note, I'm just going to pick the 100% healthy player against one of the easiest midfields in the league to score against. Number 5, Lukey Jackson. Luke was the talk of the town at 650k after he solo rucked against Vizentini and he smashed that 186. Since then, he's averaged a flat ton and lost nearly 100k. Not what you wanted as a buyer, but Sean Darcy coming back in the team was always going to tank him. At least this week, with the matchup with West Coast, it's incredibly positive anyway. In fact, West Coast are the easiest matchup in the league for both inside midfielders and ruckmen. And they're also giving up a lot of points to forwards. So wherever Jackson plays, he should score well enough to give you a great captaincy score. I'm not too worried. Over the last month, the ruck share has been approximately a 40-60 split in favour of Sean Darcy doing the 60%, Luke Jackson doing the 40%. But even with that, Luke Jackson's still doing 60% CBAs, so that means he's going in there as a ruck rover at times. So even while Darcy rucks, he's playing some CBAs. And Luke Jackson as a 60% CBA ruck/mid is going to just destroy West Coast. I'm going to put a cap on a monster ceiling score with Sean Darcy playing. Like, I don't think we're looking at a 160 when Sean Darcy's in the team, but I think this is still a really safe 120 plus. Nice safe fallback captain option if you want it. To be honest, I don't think you'll need it because there's so many other good options, but he is there if you want him, especially in draft. I think he's a really good captaincy option. But let me say, if they do rest Sean Darcy, this is probably the greatest matchup he could get, and it would nearly have to rocket up to my number 1 recommendation. I haven't had any rumours of that. I don't expect it to happen. I just wanted to flag, if it does, no, my order will change and Jackson will rocket. But as is, let's assume that Shrek's playing and leave Luke at this ranking. Number 4, Nasiah Wanganeen-Milera. Naz is the man. He's got a 155 and a 149 in his last 3 games. Talk about a ceiling. Especially after a few of us doubted him in the preseason. Not his consistency, we just doubted he had the ceiling. He hadn't really shown a 130 plus before, and wow, he is showing it now. And now, here we go, another great matchup. The Demons are the easiest matchup in the league for attacking defenders, and the 4th easiest for designated kickers. That suits Nasiah down to a T. And I've told you plenty of times throughout the year on these videos that Melbourne are giving up lots of kicks and marks to defenders. So let's use this opportunity to check in on these stats and see what they're up to now. And yeah, they still hold. Melbourne are allowing the 4th amount of kicks per game, and they're allowing the 3rd most marks per game. So that's easy pickings for a guy who covers the ground like Naz. That play style has led to some of the opponents of the Demons scoring well. So we've seen a Doherty 108, a Noble 132, a 155 from Jeremy Howe, and a 122 from Josh Dayos. So there are some big scores out there available against Melbourne. And let's be honest, none of those guys are as good or in good a form as Nasiah. So this is a great combination of a guy in form against a perfect opponent. And remember Brad Hill's comments before the season when he got asked about the Saints' game plan. And he said their game plan was get the ball to Naz and let him cook. Well, cook he is, so why stop now, Nasiah? Number 3, Andrew Brayshaw. Brayshaw has been down on his usual lofty standards over the last month, but despite that, he still has a 3-round average of 108. And that month has been against some really hard opponents, so maybe 108 is actually pretty good, given he's played some hard opponents, he's had the head knock, he's had the stitches, he's been wearing the helmet. I expect his fortunes to reverse this week with a Western Derby matchup. The Eagles are the easiest opponent for inside midfielders over the last 10 games, and a team that Andrew beats up on regularly. He's got 131 and 137 in their last 2 meetings. If you own Caleb Sarong, you can also consider him in this slot, but I'm going to recommend the guy that has taken his game to another level this year. Some recent scores against the Eagles are insane, so let's have a look. Hopper had a 139, Taranto had a 136, Butters had a 154, Wines had a 143, Horne-Francis had a 131, Callahan had a 144, Kelly had a 129, Dayos had a 131, and Pendlebury had a 129. And that's just in the last month. I could go back further, but I don't really need to. You get the point. In every game over the last month, there have been at least 2 opposition midfielders go 129 plus. So that indicates to me that both Sarong and Brayshaw should both go really well, and I think they will. Brayshaw is my pick of the 2 at the moment. I mean, he's currently sitting 4th in total points for the entire SuperCoach season. What a gun. Nicky D, number 2. I didn't recommend Nick Dacos last week due to the Freo matchup and the fact that the last time he played them, he was heavily tagged by Warner and Brayshaw and limited to a paltry 76. I thought he was going to get tagged again, but it turns out I shouldn't have been worried, because Fly and the Magpies had a plan. Nick attended only 48% of last week's centre bounces, and he showed a bit of his old halfback piggery role, racking up 24 uncontested possessions. He even went back and took the most kick-ins of all the Collingwood players. It should be noted as well that the week before against Gold Coast, he also played low CBAs and he also took a kick-in. So there's a bit of a trend here, and we've got to ask ourselves, is this a plan from Collingwood to break a tag? Or is it more about giving their star player some in-game rest and easier workload to finish the season? I wouldn't be surprised to see Nick play in the backline a lot more to end the year, because Collingwood want to balance keeping him fresh for finals while still giving him a chance to win the Brownlow. So I don't think he's going to miss games. I think he's going to play all the remaining games, but I think they might just shift his role a bit. And either way, it doesn't matter for us, as halfback piggery Nick Dacos is absolutely elite for SuperCoach scoring. I wonder if Kane Corns will blast him for racking up the sheezies. But what better team to rack up the sheezies than on Richmond? The best matchup in the league for designated kickers. The Tigers have recently given up 119 to Liam Duggan, 142 to Archie Roberts, 133 to Zach Guthrie, and 121 to Josh Worrell. I mean, seriously, if you're allowing those sort of players to put up career numbers, what is Nick Dacos going to do in this one? It could be a monster. Whether he plays inside mid or halfback sheezy ball, I don't see a world where this isn't a 130 plus from Nick. It's just not going to be under. But it has every chance to be much, much, much bigger. But, number 1, Maxi Gawn. Max Gawn non-owners have been getting off a bit lightly in recent weeks. He's just gotten through what might be the hardest 4-week stretch that any ruckman could have. And he still managed to average 102 in that time, so that's not bad. And that ruck run that he just had is probably the most difficult I've ever seen. That changes now, and it changes violently for Max Gawn faders. A matchup with an injury-hampered Rowan Marshall. He's the 5th easiest matchup in the league, and someone that allows his opponents plus 10 points per game on their form. I mean, we've recently seen a Grundy 154, a Meek 140, and a Cameron 156 against Roma. Wowie, those are huge numbers. And they're the type of numbers that I expect Max Gawn to rip on him as well. Max Gawn is the highest scorer in SuperCoach 2025 for a reason. Don't let those last 4 weeks lull you into a false sense of security. And if you own Max Gawn, don't let them make you forget that you own the best player in SuperCoach, and you should be captaining him against one of the easiest matchups in the league. There are so many good captaincy options this week, and Max versus a hobbling Rowan Marshall might just be the very best of them. There we go. They're my favourite 10 captains options of the week. As you can see, there is going to be some gigantic scores out there. But as always, here's a bunch of names that didn't quite make the cut. A lot of these you could use in Classic as well, because I think a lot of these are really good options. But definitely awesome options in draft. So Libba and Dale on the Friday night against Essendon, I think they're both going to go big. I talked about Josh Dunkley, but also Lockie Neal and Hugh McCluggage, I think are both really good options. Caleb Sarong, I think he's going to do really well. And then in that same game, his half-backers, Jordan Clark and Luke Ryan against the Eagles, they should do really well. I talked up Max Holmes, but in the same game, you could look at Bailey Smith, or in draft, I actually reckon you should look at Tom Atkins. If you're a Tom Atkins owner, which someone will be, I think that could be a big one. Riley O'Brien, I think he's a really good matchup. He's got a matchup with Sweetie. Look, Sweet did absolutely dominate last week, but I don't think he's really that restrictive. So O'Brien's an option. Also Rory Laird in that game. I mean, you could look at the Port guys like Butters and maybe Dawson as well, but half-backers against Port have been racking it up, so maybe it's someone like Lairdy. And then in that Richmond-Collingwood game, there's quite a few. We've talked about Nick, but also Josh. I think Josh Dayos is going to go well. And Darcy Cameron, there has been talk that Darcy Cameron will get a rest at some stage. I haven't heard when. If he plays this game against Nank, I think that's a really nice matchup for him. And then in this Melbourne St Kilda game, there's a few. I mean, any midfielder against Melbourne, if they avoid the tag, has been going well. So maybe Jack McRae is an option. But then there's some half-backers. Both of these teams give up huge points to half-backers. So talked about Nasiah, but at the same boat, you could look at Jack Sinclair in draft. And even on the other side, Saints giving up a lot, so someone like Jake Bowie is an option, or maybe even Stephen May. Or, oh no, he'll probably be suspended. Maybe not May, so probably Jake Bowie. Now for me, I'm probably going to vice captain Marcus Bontempelli and captain Brody Grundy. I think that's where I'm at. But I'm also a bit sad about missing the Dayos versus Richmond captaincy, as I'm planning to probably go to that game. So there is a chance I change it last minute and I just go with Dayos because I'm going to be at the game and I want to watch him live, but we'll see how we go. To be honest, if I've got the VC on Marcus, I don't think I'm going to be needing anyone else. But now, given the huge amount of massive captain options this week, if you don't get onto a 130 plus, it could spell danger. I really struggled ranking my top 5 this week, and those top 5 being Bont, Grundy, Gawn, Dayos and Brayshaw, as I genuinely think all of them could go 150 plus. That's not an exaggeration. Their matchups are that good. I mean, any other week, Josh Dunkley would probably be the number 1 VC and Andrew Brayshaw would be the number 1 C. That's how good their matchups are. And they're still so far down the list because, as I said, I'm calling it. We're going to see our first 2,900 of the season this round, and it's going to be a big round. Thanks for watching. Good luck this weekend, and I hope it is you with the 2,900 score, my friend.